Down for a minute.
Welcome to Search Talk Live with search engine optimization and marketing experts Robert O'Haver and Matt Weber. Powered by the Robert Palmer family of companies.
We need the intro.
Welcome to Search Talk Live with search engine optimization and marketing experts Robert O'Haver and Matt Weber. Powered by the Robert Palmer family of companies.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Search Talk Live. I'm your host, Robert O'Haver, along with Matt Weber. Matt, how are you?
I am doing fantastic. Good to be back home.
Yeah, I wanted to take a brief second to let everybody know that the recent hurricane we came through, we dodged a bullet here in Florida, but our prayers go out to those people that live in the Bahamas, and want to just mention that.
And you and I were ready to do the show. I mean, we had our raincoats, we had our deep boots on. Man, we had the generator here. We had the charcoal ready.
Charcoal?
For the fire, in case of electricity. We had to eat, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But last minute, we decided to cancel for safety because really Charles didn't want to do it. You and I were in, but Charles didn't want to do it.
Yeah. So I want to thank everybody for listening to the show. We have a huge following and listeners. We're getting a lot of good comments and emails back saying how much they love the show, and I just want to thank everyone for supporting the show, supporting our sponsors, Ahrefs or Ahrefs. It's ahrefs.com, and along with our other sponsors, we really appreciate your sponsorship, and we also want everyone to check out those guys. If you haven't used their services, let me tell you, Matt, you can speak for it.
We lean on them every day.
Every day. So much data. Sometimes you're like, wow. But all right, so let's get back to the show. Today we're going to be talking about local search. One of the things, we do quite a bit of shows on this, but I think it's really important because there's so many different views and things that you don't get from one person. So we want to do, at least once a quarter, something about local search. So
yeah, I think it's one of the least understood parts of search engine marketing.
It is definitely. And there's so many, I still see to this day so many old school techniques that were done like 5-10 years ago that just don't work anymore, and people don't really understand. I think it's just out of not having knowledge about the topic, or the skill set. Plus you get a lot of website owners that kind of take it upon themselves to save money and just, they find something on the web, and of course everything on the web is true, right?
Right. Well, fortunately today we have the man.
Yes. Today our guest, he is an author, well known in the industry. He's got one of the most respected blogs on Google Maps and local search, and he's also the co-founder of getlisted.org. But I'll let you tell him about himself because he is an expert on himself. Mike Blumenthal. Mike, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. So I'm the co-founder of LocalU and GatherUp. Get Listed was David Mims' company that he sold to Moz, that became Moz Local. I did help him beta test that and certainly helped him sort of conceive of it, but I wasn't a founder of Get Listed.
Oh.
We did jointly start LocalU together, though, so our names are often associated with each other. LocalU is a digital training for agencies and small businesses. We travel around the country. We do a weekly podcast. In fact, we have an advanced event for that in Denver, September 19th. I think the tickets price goes up on the 13th. And GatherUp is a reputation management tool that allows businesses, local businesses, to gather, manage from, and market with their review and feedback.
We're getting a bad connection here. You started sounding like you're talking through a fan blade. I don't know what happened.
Great to have Mike on the show, though. Really one of the top
definitely.
names in local search.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I pulled that information from SMX's website on your bio.
Okay. Can you hear me all right now?
Not really good. Let's try. I'm going to call you right back on the Skype.
All right. I'm going to.
What's that? All right, guys. Matt, you want to fill the dead air real quick?
Yeah, I'd like to tell everybody about an event that's coming up. It is Thursday. If you're in the Orlando, Central Florida area, I'm going to be doing a special session on Google Ads, and it's at the National Entrepreneur Center in Orlando at the Orlando Fashion Square Mall, and it's at 9 o'clock. It's $30 to register, and it's 2 hours of packed information on Google Ads, and you can find more information under events at roarwebsite.com. roarwebdesign.com.
Mike, can we hear you?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. Okay. So go back. Can you go back through, tell us about yourself again? I'm sorry.
Sure. So I was born and bred in upstate Western New York, small town south of Buffalo. Started a web hosting company and design 2001. Got into local search 2006. 2010, I founded Local U with a number of partners, Mary Bowling, David Mim, a number of others. And 2013, I founded Gather Up, which at the time we called Get 5 Stars, which is an online solution to help local businesses engage productively with the world of reviews by gathering them more efficiently, leveraging them for management insights, and then also leveraging them for their marketing and content strategy.
Very nice. So let's get into it. Where do you want to start? Now, actually, before we get too much into it, I would like you to tell about the case study you kind of told me about previously with the customer. I think that is very fascinating, and I think that it would be a good thing for people to hear.
So I ride my bike to work every day, and I noticed a new business had opened where a restaurant had previously closed. It was a restaurant, and this was a restaurant location that had 3 restaurants at it in the last 4 years, and this new one opened, and they had a Facebook-only presence. So I was very curious to see if they would allow me to help them create a complimentary Google presence, no website, no other citations, and to see if they would be able to generate more leads with Facebook or more leads with Google, if they would be able to live without a citation campaign, because there was a lot of NAP confusion at that physical location because there had been multiple restaurants there prior to them, and to see whether we could rank reasonably well because they were sort of just outside the edge of town. Even though it's a small town, there's a lot of restaurants. There's probably 80 or 90 restaurants because we're the only city, if you can call it that, in about 50 miles. So there's a lot of restaurants to compete with. So we started off by claiming their Google listing. This was in June of 2018. And I built them a Google My Business webpage shortly thereafter. And historically, people thought that Google My Business web pages couldn't rank, but this one ranked within 6 weeks with no links, just showed up in the search results for breakfasts in town. I trained her how to do Google Posts, and for the first 3 or 4 months, all she did was Facebook post and Google post. She was posting at Facebook probably 3 times a week, maybe once a week at Google. And during that period, in tracking conversions, and for her, or tracking KPIs, we defined driving directions and click to calls, which were the only data we could get, as the primary KPIs from either Facebook or Google. During the first 3 months, she got probably 3 times as many of those driving directions and phone calls from Google as she got from Facebook. So it's a pretty clean setup, right? There was no website for Google to look at. She had no citations because she was brand new. She only had a Facebook presence, so Google didn't know much about her. And yet, within a fairly short period of time, they were ranking. She was getting some fair bit of traction. So last fall, we added menu items for it. I was thinking that perhaps having the detail in the Google My Business website with all our menu items would increase her rank. It had zero impact. Meanwhile, she was seeing some increased traffic, and she was continuing to get 7 to 10 times the leads from Google than from her purely organic Facebook presence, right? So she wasn't advertising in Facebook. She wasn't boosting. She wasn't doing any targeting. She was just posting. She had a fairly loyal following. Number of people that would share her things was fairly active, but still she wasn't seeing many leads that we could track or that Facebook was, sending to her.
Yeah.
The menu had zero impact. I thought it would have some impact. But in December, Google added an ability to manipulate the title tag of the website through the Google My Business webpage. It's a single-page website. It's fairly unsophisticated. No ability to control meta description, for example. They sort of just grab the top first H1 or H2 on the page, use that as a meta description. But they did finally add the ability to control the title tag. We just added the word restaurant, the city, breakfast, and lunch, and that immediately left her increased her rank particularly in the breakfast and both short tail and long tail terms. It sort of quadrupled her website, her visibility in search instantly just by controlling the title tags. So that was December, and in mid-January, she's a small restaurant. She serves maybe 20, 25 meals breakfast, 20, 25 meals lunch, right? Doesn't have a huge budget, had no way to gather email addresses or to easily ask for reviews. So we had just built a new feature at GatherUp called Text Back, which essentially allows the client or the customer frequenting the Spot to Be restaurant to text a quick little message to our system, and it starts the feedback and review process. So we built her some tents for the table with calls to action on them, put them on the countertops and on the tables, and she started getting reviews, first and third party reviews, using this text back system. She had somebody new come in, she'd mention the feature, they'd be able to point their phone at it and instantly start the review process. She was able to get, she had gotten a few reviews prior to that, but her reviews really started ticking up. I can't remember the exact number, but it went from, 4 to like 30 in a couple months. That was interesting experiment on a number of levels. But what we saw was a slight increase in keyword exposure, but an improvement on the longer tail keywords particularly. In other words, the ones that were in the 30, 40, 50 position were consistently moving up. So she was continuing to get increased exposure, still getting 10x. Now remember, we did no citation building for her. We didn't clean up the citations, and the citations were totally a mess because there had been 3 restaurants there prior. So one of the learnings in this is that citations are not structured citations at the multitude of sites that people use, have little to no ranking impact in and of themselves, and even having NAP confusion, while it's not recommended, doesn't seem to hold a site back. So those are two interesting learnings in this that we tested, and it's not to say that that it's ideal, but it doesn't have any very, very big impact. Reviews at this point had a significant impact. And then in June, I wrote up a case study for her at GatherUp and a summary of it at Blumenthal's. So she got her first 2 links. Had no links prior to this. And instantly, again, we saw a big jump, both in PAC results and organic results around a couple phrases that we were targeting, all-day breakfast, lunches, those sorts of things.
So what would you say was the majority of the traffic? Was it from the PAC, or was it from the post that you were
well, interestingly, similar, I don't have the exact date, but what we saw was users shifted over, at least in the restaurant segment, to using Google Maps. So the bulk of her traffic is actually coming from Google Maps, not that's discovery and recovery traffic, both, not from the pack or from organic. She's getting some from organic and some from the pack, but the bulk of it appears to be coming from Google Maps, which was shocking to me because historically Google Maps has not provided either the user experience or the searchability. But in the restaurant world, Google has put a lot of effort into improving the results, and people are starting to use it for discovery. So she was getting out-of-town visitors looking for the best, breakfast restaurant, and she was getting those kind of folks. So surprisingly, the bulk of it was coming and is coming from Google Maps.
There's a lot to unpack in that case study. Certainly, among the topics we want to pursue is the death of citations. There's an awful lot of people listening to the show that spend a good deal of time doing citation building. But then secondly, the other thing that you didn't do with her, Mike, is you didn't put her into the data aggregators, which was also one of the conventional, you got to do this to make sure that you rank. What's your thought on where are the data aggregators now in the role of Google My Business ranking in the local pack?
So most of the data aggregators have gone by the wayside. Axion sold their product. Localese is, not much. And Factual sort of doesn't really do that. They do more data analysis, doesn't really do aggregation much anymore. So the only aggregator worth anything is Info USA, Info Group. And what I discovered was that through her phone number, through getting a local phone number, she showed up there. She didn't even do an entry there. So they discovered her fairly early on. I see Info Group, particularly for new business, as a valuable thing because I know Google still looks at them for validation, not necessarily for rank. Structured site. I went back and read a post from 2006 I did on the attributes of a restaurant that was ranking well. And back then, we didn't call them citations. It was before David Mim named them in 2008. They were called by Google web references, and they were surfaced in the graph, the knowledge graph, or whatever they called it back then, the local business listing. Those web references were surfaced, and I cataloged them. And what I found were review sites with reviews. I found some citation sites. I found articles, New York Times, those sorts of things. So what I see, citations, the citation itself, and as I noted in the article, it was likely that the low-value citations would ultimately be normalized out of the system, right? So the thing about a citation I think people need to understand is it only helps you in ranking if the citation itself adds value to the listing, right? And that could be, for example, a Yelp page with a lot of reviews on them. Yelp will rank that page highly. That will contribute to your rank in local. But just having a Yelp listing is of little consequence. And certainly having a listing at sites less important than Yelp, you might as well, not waste your time. So having reviews at a site, having articles in newspapers, having, local mentions, those are all citations that were visible back then that are still valuable now. And any citation where you can influence its rank in some way and have it move up in page prominence is a valuable citation. So it's not that citations aren't valuable, but the idea that you're going to pay some subscription fee to feed your listing to 40 directories, it's really a meaningless exercise these days, particularly for single location businesses.
So
it may have value
notes
to a big chain because they aren't able to keep a canonical list of their locations, so it may have value in that sense. Or maybe a company that has a lot of locations change their hours frequently might have value in that sense, but has no value is a ranking tool or very little value. Even NAP confusion. So I went and I finally, about a month ago, 2 weeks ago, cleaned up some of the NAP confusion that was out there, the many restaurants that had been at the same location. And so far, we haven't seen it impact rank or visibility at all. So even that, Google's new knowledge graph seems much more stable, much less influenced by bad data. You have to realize that the idea of cleaning up messy NAP came from the fact that Google used to rebuild their index every 6 weeks using organic results. And if you never knew when a confusing citation might influence that new result inappropriately. So the only way you could control that was by making sure they were clean. But after Google switched the knowledge panel, the authoritative nature of that listing sort of became fixed in the database, and it was much less likely that some errant web listing would goof it up.
Yeah.
So
we can't let that go by too quickly, Robert, because in the past 3.5 minutes, Mike just really changed the course of local search optimization for a lot of people listening to the show.
Sure.
So citation building, routine, feeding it to aggregators, less impactful on that. Being fanatically concerned about the accuracy of your NAP, which many people are still doing, not an impact.
I hate messy naps. You always have to change the sheets. I'm just sorry.
Okay, insider joke. Well, Mike, let's go the other way then and say, give us some sense of what are the signals that have increased in strength. You've done a great job of telling what's decreased in strength. What are the signals that are now becoming more dominant as far as local search ranking?
Well, there's all sorts of signals that we can't see from Google when you read their patents. In terms of visitation, Google knows a whole lot more than they used to about where people are going, what they're doing. So that's all hidden from us. But in terms of things that you can control, there's two issues. One, there's rank. The other is conversion. So with, I guess it was Pigeon 2014, when Google dramatically narrowed the search radius and essentially only showed most businesses in a radius of a mile or two, Google's going to show your listing within that context of that limited mobile searcher. And in that context, you're going to get shown no matter what. And there, conversion optimization is critical. Right, so conversion optimization being looking better than the next guy in that pack result. So making your brand story stand out in that limited context you have. So that's reviews, great photos, enticing posts, the kinds of things you can do at Google to provide them with data. In terms of ranking, what we found in terms of this case study that was impactful was reviews, everybody knows that, links, everybody knows that, and in terms of expanding reach, reviews and posts seem to expand the sort of the depth of long tail and the rank of those long tail phrases.
Okay. Now we want to get your thoughts on three.
Now this is a single location case study. So, these are correlations, not causation. But I because it's such a clean sort of subject, right, with not a lot of noise. There's not links floating around. There's no website. These are indicators that I think the correlation is likely to be causation because they're so tightly bound. Like, for example, when I dropped a couple links to her from Gather Up and Blumenthal's, we immediately started our rank tracker immediately started dinging, and we started seeing ranking on searches we hadn't seen before. So clearly that is a correlation, but it's a solid one. Do you know what I mean?
Let's talk about three kind of experimental, innovative techniques, if you will, that are floating around the local search forums, and let's get your thoughts on these. Three experimental techniques. Number one, having an appendix of local specific links on either the Contact Us page or the location page of a website. So if you're trying to target Orlando, you've got a little appendix on the sidebar that says Orlando Parks and Recreations, Orlando Things to Do, Orlando such and such. What's your thoughts on that as an innovative technique?
Well, how many angels fit on the head of a pin?
I don't know that one.
Don't know.
Oh, I don't know. Certainly solid outbound links from a website are viewed by Google as a sign of a quality website. So I don't see it as a, trying to, I see websites the way I hope Google is starting to see them, which is that if the content, even if it links off the site to valuable local resources, valuable to the user, it's going to help. And we've seen outbound links consistently on high-ranking sites be valuable. As far as this particular tactic in terms of sidebars as a way of manipulating rank, I see it as less than useful to the searcher, and probably going to have minimal impact on rank.
Yeah, I'll have to agree with that one. Yeah. Number 2, publishing the GMB website without pointing your main domain to it.
Oh, it's like any citation. If it doesn't have any value, it doesn't have any value. So for it to have value, you'd have to do link building to it or add some other value to that page. It's just going to sit low in the index. You have to understand, these days, they're not ranked. It used to be they ranked your home page on your website was the authoritative page that influenced rank and local. But since the advent of the knowledge panel, it is now the entity in the knowledge graph that gets ranked. And that gets ranked by association with valuable pages that it can associate with it. In other words, a high-ranking Yelp page, a high-ranking website. Those things confer value back to the entity in the knowledge graph. And so having a Google My Business website that just sits out there, buried on page 4, it's kind of like the dead body. It sits out there beyond page 2, doesn't do much good.
All right, number 3, but that's a hot technique. That's that last one is getting some buzz in a couple different forms. Now, this next one I actually think I've heard you talk about on your video cast, and that is that if you're a service-based business and you've chosen a service geography, to have a cell phone number that spends time in the physical city that you are trying to target as the number in the directory.
As far as I can tell, Google is pretty agnostic. You're saying that the business itself would have a cell phone number that Google could, like an Android, that Google could track around and sees that it's in that geography?
Yes.
You mentioned that before in the past.
Yeah, and there's a study, and I thought I might have heard on your show, but maybe it was Joy's, that somebody had a landscaping business, and they were trying to track that when their client was actually in a particular geographical unit, a city, they were getting more calls from that particular city, theorizing that they were showing up in GMBs for service-related searches with that particular city. Next day, he goes to a different city, and lo and behold, he gets more calls from that particular city. So they were postulating that it was because, and it was a service-based listing, that the cell phone number in the listing was physically in that city at that time.
I have no data on it. I mean, I could only make a guess, right? I mean, it's and I don't really have a good guess. I'd have to test it. And that's what I'd suggest, right? If you have a theory, build a good test. The problem with most tests is people build messy tests, right? And so you want to be careful to try to limit the variables and see what happens. I really can't speak to that one intelligently. I've never tried it. Don't have any good data on it.
Super interesting, though, isn't it? If it were true.
Yeah, but there's so many variables, I mean, your service area alone, if you have, there's just a lot there.
But you think about how the data works for, popular times at this location. What's that all based on? It's all based on where cell phones are.
It's also personalized results. So, like, if you did that search multiple times
from
your phone, your Google's going to think, okay, well, maybe he's wanting to go back to this person because he clicked on him before.
That's true too. Right.
So I mean, there's other variables.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I totally agree. And Mike, while we're kind of on this topic a little bit, you brought up reviews and the effect that it had in your case study. I think we need to work a little bit about what's the safest way for people to solicit reviews, and walk us through a little bit of what are some of the do's and don'ts in terms of incentivizing reviews.
Sure. So Yelp explicitly prohibits, in their terms of service, solicitation of reviews. If you do it at Yelp, you're likely to get the red badge of shame. TripAdvisor and Google both encourage you to solicit reviews. Google's rules are basically that you can't incentivize them, and so is TripAdvisor. Can't incentivize them in any way. And I just wrote a blog post to gather up on incentivizing TripAdvisor. This hotel, this green hotel, had an interesting incentive where they would make a donation to a charitable organization if you wrote a TripAdvisor review. They didn't make any contention that it had to be a good review. There was no direct incentive. It was an indirect incentive. I showed it to TripAdvisor. TripAdvisor said, absolutely against our guidelines. So and what the FTC says about this, which is the sort of ruling national body, is that if you are going to do a review that has incentives, you need to note the incentives in the review, which you can't do at Google and TripAdvisor. You can only do that in first-party reviews. So I guess given that matrix where incentives are banned at Yelp and Google and TripAdvisor, and the FTC says you can use them, but you have to make it bold and include the fact that you had an incentive, then I think incentives are off the table. And to a large extent, I find them unnecessary. I just, we see a lot of review requests going up.
Mike, we have to take a break real quick. Hold that thought. We'll be back right after this message.
Sounds good.
Today's episode of Search Talk Live is sponsored by...
Hey, Robert, you're here early for the show.
Yeah, I got a ton of SEO work done this morning, and I got it done way ahead of schedule. Couldn't have done it without Ahrefs.
Yeah, so much easier than using multiple programs and having data in a bunch of different places.
Plus, being able to see what is holding a page back from ranking in Ahrefs is so much faster than picking through each part myself.
Oh, yeah, I agree. We use Ahrefs because it's so easy to teach people at our agency how to use it. Their YouTube tutorials couldn't be better. It's one thing to have a tool. It's another thing to know your team is using it to its full capacity. I don't think there's an easier, more complete tool than Ahrefs. Hey, Robert, why don't you hit them up to be a sponsor of the show?
I am way ahead of you.
Ahrefs, the official SEO tool of Search Talk Live. Try their new 7-day trial for only $7. Go to Ahrefs.com. That's Ahrefs.com.
Your website analytics data probably feels like this, but it could feel like this. Making sense of all the website data available to you hasn't been easy until now. Smialytics transforms your website analytics data into easy-to-understand, memorable photographs. You pick your own photo theme. Smialytics, S-M-Y-L-E, lytics. Like analytics, only happier. And it's free at Smialytics.com. Want to know how your website is doing? Get the big picture with pictures. It's the easiest and most enjoyable way to understand your website data. No charts, no graphs, no cost. Sign up today. Smialytics, S-M-Y-L-E, lytics, like analytics. Only happier at Smialytics.com.
Learning a lot from Search Talk Live, but don't know what specific SEO actions you should be taking on your website? Or maybe you've tried to implement SEO on your website, but haven't gotten the results you were aiming for. We've all been there. That's why we here at Pixel Cut Labs created the Seo Project Planner. It's a one-time project where our SEO team runs a full site crawl, overlays data from leading SEO tools, and manually audits every page on your website. We'll use our findings to craft a strategic plan that covers everything from your link building strategy to page-level technical SEO and content recommendations. The project planner is perfect for businesses that are serious about SEO and want to hit a home run by leveraging our proven SEO strategy. To learn more and to see pricing for your project, visit pixelcutlabs.com/STL or text STL to 31996. Pixel Cut Labs. Welcome to page 1.
Get your questions in on Twitter. Type hashtag SearchTalkLive and your question. Now back to the show.
All right. We're back to the show. Be sure if you have a question for Mike, you can go on Twitter and type hashtag SearchTalkLive, and we'll ask those questions live on the show. But Mike, go ahead and finish your thoughts.
So incentives are a bad idea all the way around. The worst thing about an incentive, though, isn't that Google prohibits it or the FTC prohibits it, is that if one of your clients gets suspicious and has a bad experience and mentions that you incentivize them, that goes into a review, then that review is there forever. And everybody's going to question the quality and integrity of your business and your reviews. So it's not just that they're against the rules, it's that other consumers might find them objectionable. And if that gets mentioned, that'll be there forever, right?
That's what they should have. That's what they should have is sponsored reviews.
But if you're looking to grease, to me, the thing that's the most highest integrity and easiest way to get more reviews is, even if you're going to follow up with an email, is you ask them during the sale if it's okay if you send them an email and they give you their social agreement. That social agreement is a huge commitment that people will make. And if they do, the likelihood of getting a review goes way up, even though, when you follow up with that email. If you're going to incentivize anything, perhaps you could incentivize your salespeople. The problem there is you run the risk of it overtaking the sales process and customer experience process. Mm-hmm. So you have to be really careful they don't get weird about it and ask 27 times, which has happened to me. And the other possibility is you could incentivize somebody leaving you an email address. Those are legal incentives that can then lead into more reviews. But in both those, you have to be cautious to not compromise your brand.
How do you feel about automated a system? Let's say you have your content management, or not content management. What am I talking about?
Your CRM.
CRM. Thank you. Your CRM automating the process. So, like, your client has used your service. At the end of the service agreement, then it automatically sends out an email to that client saying, "Hey, if you're happy with our service, please,
Sure.
feel free to give us a review."
I mean, I think automation is really helpful, particularly if you're more than a mom and pop operation. If you have more than one location or more than a couple employees, automation becomes critical, which is one of the reasons we built Zapier and an API into GatherUp, right, was so that we could automate. And what we find is every industry and every business has a sort of natural flow of reviews, mm-hmm, and just the process of consistently being sure that you do in fact ask is a great contributor to success, because reviews are a long haul game, right? They're a 3-year, 5-year game. They're not a 1 month, 2 month game. Consistent, steady asking on a regular basis is a recipe for long haul success. And automation, like I said, we've built in APIs and JSON feeds and Zapier into our product because we think automation is a great contributor to that, because the business doesn't have to put in place one more process.
Yeah, very good. All right. Well, before the break, we were supposed to do what is called Who Influences the Influencer. Now, we want to know, you, the influencer, who influences you? Where do you get your information, and who's your kind of mentors?
So, to me, in local space, there's two that I turn to regularly. One is Joy Hawkins, who I think is one of the smartest people in the space and does some of the best experiments, most rigorous testing and documenting of the outcomes. She has a great book. So Joy she was sort of I used to mentor Joy. Now she mentors me. So kudos to Joy. Bill Slawski, when he writes on patents in the local space, yep, is I follow him closely. And then I like looking outside the local space, because the local space is part and parcel of a bigger environment. So I look at two people regularly. One is Horace Didu, who analyzes the Apple space, which has a huge impact on local, but he also analyzes the automotive and mobility space, which I think is a big play in local. And then Ben Thompson, who writes Stratechery, which is a very sophisticated analysis of sort of one level up again, sort of looking at the higher order functioning of Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, WeWorks, etc., Uber, those kinds of places. So those are the four that, if I could only pick four and go to a desert island, that's who I'd go with.
That's a great list. Now, Joy is going to be a guest on the show in just a couple weeks, Mike. So if you want to email us a question that you're sure is going to stump her, you just email that out, and we will not tell her it came from you.
There is no question that's going to stump Joy. She's really, like I said, I think she is the leading luminary in local these days. I spend a lot of time on reviews. I used to spend more time in local, and she really has picked up that mantle and done a great job with it. She's really worked hard at being the expert in the field. Singular in the sense of really very few people can touch her.
So nice. Joy coming up as a guest on Search Talk Live.
Next week.
Now, Mike, we've got a lot of folks listening to the show who took a kind of a set it and forget it stance with their GMB profile. What do you think is the most underutilized feature in your experience in GMB?
Well, I think there's two, if I can pick two. Well, in terms of the most underutilized feature, probably the messaging feature is the most underutilized because Google has sort of screwed it up so royally off and on over the years in terms of underutilized. In terms of benefit, back to this idea of conversion optimization, photos and posts. I think that posts are now showing up in answers to Q&A. They're showing up in the 3-pack. So I think that posts have reach beyond just the posts themselves. And I think photos, great photos, not stock photography, great photos can have a huge influence on sort of the subconscious decision to pick you over the next company. And I think conversion optimization at the point of interaction on Google, I'm seeing in case studies, I'm seeing 70, 80% of digital leads happening right on Google, not coming to the website, not going someplace else, happening right on Google. If that's the case across your business or for your business, then looking the best you can look at Google is critical. And that's, like I said, photos, posts, and the other sort of ancillary tools that they give you, products and services, et cetera. But
that means
posts and photos.
We got to step into the great debate, Robert, which is the FAQ schema debate, right? So we've got folks on one side of the debate that say, now that we've crossed the line that 50% of search engine results pages don't get a click,
yep,
we've got Google doing a masterful job of answering searchers' questions right on the SERP, which means more businesses are losing out on website traffic on that. And where's Google with that? So some folks say FAQ schema, you're giving the user a chance to be satisfied on the SERP and then therefore not be exposed to deeper additional information you have on your website. Opposite side of the argument is, all right, so you give the user what they want at the earliest possible level in the journey, so you're making the customer happy on that. Robert, where do you stand on that?
My stance is that it's better to be there than not to be there. Do you know what I'm saying? So given that chance for them to possibly click through to your site, then not at all. I mean, that's where I stand.
So the battle is going to be elevated on the SERP itself, is in your mind? Which is pretty consistent with what Mike is saying right now.
Yes, absolutely.
And Mike, is that your sense too when it comes to FAQ schema? Do you land on the side of, if the customer wants the information at the earliest possible point, then give it to them, even though they won't be exposed to your additional messaging on your website?
In local, I see FAQ schema as a little bit further down the task list. I would see event schema as more critical because it's more likely to show up in the knowledge graph and have its own knowledge panel. Yeah. But ultimately, you have to realize that your website is feeding these results, and you want to feed them as richly as possible. If your business is complicated enough that they need to go beyond Google, you want to look as good as you can at Google to attract them to your website, where because you have a complicated goods or service, you can close them. But if you have a simple thing or the decision isn't that big a deal, like in a lot of bricks and mortar, should I visit this retailer? That's not a life-changing decision. And if the bulk of those decisions are going to be made at Google, then by all means, give it to them. So it depends a little bit on your business, but regardless of whether you're in the more sophisticated business or not, you still got to give them the information at Google. So,
yeah, and I also think the other thing is you have, as you well know, there is informational type of searches that really aren't applicable to the service that you offer, or maybe they're just trying to fix their toilet or something like that. It's, those worthless visits to your site anyway.
Except for long-term brand exposure.
Correct.
Right? So if the consumer sees that you're the subject matter expert in that particular topic, there's a value to that. Mike, I think you're going to shock people with the answer to this next question, but what's your sense of how big of a deal is fraudulent local GMB listings? How rampant is that?
Well, so local is really hyper-local. And by that I mean that the problem is worse in certain industries and certain geographies. And, Google themselves admitted that in some geographies, in locksmith, the problem could be as big as 80, 85%, right?
Wow.
But, and it's worse in sort of urban areas. It's worse in certain verticals like garage door openers, appliance repairs, locksmiths, lawyers. Depends on what you call spam. But in others, it's in bricks and mortar, it's a relatively free environment. It's hard to spam a bricks and mortar location. because the call to act, the conversion is the visit, right? So what good does putting a fake listing up there do? So it's very dependent on a million things. If you asked me what percentage of all of Google's 150 million listings are spam, I'd say that's sort of, I think it's probably about 3 or 4%. I think that's not a great way to look at it, because the question is what percentage of businesses that people search on and see are spam is probably a better question. Only people that can answer that's Google. And the other side of it is, look, if it's in your business and in your industry and in your market, then part of your SEO strategy, whether it's you or the agency, should be to take those spammers down, because you're being cheated, the consumer's being cheated. Yeah. So I have no trouble aggressively focusing on a market that serves a client to be sure that the spam is reported and taken down.
Yeah, I call it sniping. I go through listings for specific keywords in the local areas, and if I see somebody trying to get by with, hey, here's the keyword, yada yada, whatever it may be,
in the title of their name,
correct, I change it because I'm a contributor, but it doesn't help. But
just a tactic on this, that one of the things that Google responds to better is when you find spam at scale, right?
Yeah.
They like to take it down at scale rather than onesies. So one of the things I've developed, I did a blog post on this, but if you go into the local finder not logged in and manage to identify some sort of phrase that frequently seems to be associated with a lot of spam listings, let's say, I don't know, locksmith plus city quote kind of things, and you go into you click through into the local finder, and then you do an all in title and zoom out, you can quite frequently find massive numbers of these across broad expanses. Then you turn those into Google, you put them into a spreadsheet, you communicate with Google via Twitter, so it's private. Then you have a chance not just of taking your own local ones out, but of taking the broader, having an impact on the broader network. Yeah. And Google's more likely to respond because you're dealing with it at scale.
Some of these are so good, people don't even know they're looking at a spam GMB listing. What are the 2 or 3 common indicators of a spammy GMB listing?
So when I'm looking, I look for non-brand, keywords instead of obvious brands. So in the title, and then I often click through the reviews. If a lot of the reviews are hidden, the review profiles are hidden, that's a good, those two things together are a pretty good sign. And then if you see this pattern of keyword plus city, that's, a deal sealer. You're dealing with a spam network. But those 3 things. Now, those aren't the only things, but those are quick, high-level indicators. And I would say to the consuming public, I wouldn't use Google for locksmiths, garage door openers, or appliance repair, because in those verticals, it's brutal.
Yeah, and I like your perspective that it is costing you as a business. So you may think, okay, I'm not spammy, I'm not really affected by this problem. But actually you are when you think about the limited inventory of slots available in the local pack. And if 1 or 2 or 3 of those is being taken up by illicit or illegal or unregulated listings, it's pushing you out of one.
Potentially, absolutely. And more important, typically local searches done on a phone within a radius of a mile or 2, you're going to show up. It's on the broader searches where you're more likely to be impacted because the spammers have used the city and the keyword in the title. You're more likely to be impacted on those broader searches, which are happening less and less, but they're still important. And justifiably, a business should be angry about that and defend their turf.
Yeah. My success rate, by the way, for me, it's like less than 5%. Of the ones that I've contested, that I've been able to follow up and see them disappear, I'd say it's less than 5%. Do you have a?
Yeah, well, I don't track them personally, but I am a member of a reporting cabal where we've put together
great.
four or 5 people with high local guide standing that help each other validate and report spam, and that seems to increase the chances of success.
I'm so glad you were a guest on the show because I thought the word cabal was only a word used on the show Blacklist, but I now know that it has a broader meaning.
Well, it's any group of people that conspire to an end.
That is so great. I feel enlightened. Less about Blacklist now. I feel a little bit less about the show.
All right, so it's that time.
It's that time for Believe It or Leave It, Mike. And what we're going to do is give you 3 statements we found on the internet about local search. And I'm going to ask you to tell our audience whether they should believe it or whether they should leave it. Are you ready?
Well, I'm ready. Can I say no comment, or is that not?
No,
I have to answer. Huh?
That would be too easy because Joy has already told. Joy's told us she's going to answer all 3 of them, so you can't bow out.
Oh, how about if I say test it yourself, damn it? No, okay,
No.
Go ahead.
Here we go.
I'll give it my best shot.
All right, number 1, if your business's physical address is outside the main metro area you want to compete in, it is better for you to choose a service area in your GMB listing as a business whose customers do not come to your physical location, even if they do.
Good question.
It is a great question, but I would suggest to the business that they've missed the mark by putting their business where there are no customers. If they're truly a walk-in business, then you got to be where you're convenient to people. It's like, either you're a walk-in business or you're not. If you are, then locate correctly. So you need to go up one level and fix your freaking business before.
But I think in situations that there are slight geographical lines, like there are.
Oh, there are absolutely geographical lines that get arbitrarily drawn by Google. Yeah. But like I said, the bulk of searches in Google these days are non-geomodified. People looking on their phone, Google knowing where your phone is and giving you a radius around the phone. And if you depend on walk-in traffic for your business, then you need to realize that. Now, you're talking about sort of a mixed metaphor here. Somebody who wants a phone call but doesn't care about walk-in traffic, or somebody being able to drive to them. That's a very small segment of the population, and maybe for that small segment that meets that criteria, feel free. I think it's better to run your business better myself.
I agree. Yeah. All right. Number 2, you do not need a website to show up in local search results.
Well, that's true as far as it goes, right? I mean, my case study earlier demonstrates that, although I have a Google website, which they give you as part of the GMB. It's sort of a page. But you are giving up the ability to influence Google on with your internal links and your internal content, which Google looks at very closely. So the ability to link to, using keywords on your website, like you can link keyword stuff, your links on your own website all you want. Google is good with that. They figure if you're saying it's about engagement rings, the page is really about engagement rings, and that will help you. So I think internal linking is one of the strongest tactics in local. So giving up a website is a mistake, but it's doable.
Yeah. All right. Now I'm sorry.
So are these answers too complicated? Am I supposed to say just yes and no?
No, you're actually doing great.
That's great. Go ahead.
All right, number 3. The best way to rank for local search in a city where your business is not located is to acquire a temporary physical address in that city.
Well, I would say the best way to rank in local search would be to take out an ad. But so beyond that, if we're saying, okay, we're not taking out ads, then getting an office would be the best way to do it.
But there's
a real office staffed with a person.
Yeah.
So there's expense involved in it. If you want to be sustainable, right? In other words, it has to meet Google's criteria if you want it to last more than this Christmas season, whatever. If it's just a short-term income thing, you can do it at WeWork. But if you really want a sustainable solution, you need a staffed office with a phone number and a sign in the city that you want to do business in. But like I said, you can do it with AdWords and test it. If it works with AdWords, great. Then invest the amount it takes to build a real office.
So no USP boxes, no mailbox, etc. boxes, although they've been rebranded, no virtual offices, right?
No.
Yeah.
And Google's been cracking down on them left and right. So it may get by for a little bit, but it's not a sustainable tactic.
Now, I have a question for you, and I get this question quite a bit. Now, is it worth it to do your local listing for Bing, Yahoo, and all those other places? It's a 2-part question. I'll let you answer this first.
If the average age of your customers is 72, yes.
Well, you have to think that Bing is a default on a Windows computer. So,
that's right. And who's still using Windows with the default browser?
Yeah, right.
The average age is 72. So, like I said, if your demographic's older, probably is. we didn't bother for this person, and when I look in when I look in analytics, I see Bing at significantly less than 1% of conversions. These are people that have, invested in putting in, they're claiming the listing at Bing. So, less than 1% is up to you. I mean, I think there are better ways to increase your Google visibility by less than 1%, a whole lot easier, right? So to me, it's an issue of time and money, and those fall to the bottom of the heap in my time scenario.
Okay. Now, to the second part of that question. Now, with people, we've covered Google reviews and how important they are. But, I mean, when you have review places like Yelp and Google and Bing and all these other places.
Bing doesn't do reviews.
Okay. Yeah, they aggregate that. Well, you have multiple sites where people place reviews. Lawyers have lawyer.com and all this other place where they get reviews. What would you tell somebody to get reviews on all these places or focus on one?
So here's the longer story, if you don't mind. The longer story is the general review site, there were 11 of them or 12 of them in 2009. Now there's 3 general review sites, maybe 4, depending how you count them, right? So there's used to be Super Pages and Yellow Pages. They still take reviews. Yeah. Now there's Google, Yelp, Facebook is sort of half-assed. Better Business Bureau, very half-assed. So there's really 2 general review sites. You can't ask for reviews at Yelp, and if you try, you're going to get your hand slapped. So that leaves Google. So there's 1 there. But in the verticals, there are, most verticals, there's 1 or 2 review sites. And what you see happen is that Google will, if you get a few reviews at these sites, Google will elevate those pages to the first page of the brand search result. So I do believe picking 1 or 2 vertical sites is useful for lightweight efforts. I don't think you should put a lot of work into it. But to me, the most important thing beyond, say, Google and 1 vertical site is your own site. I think getting your own reviews is the unheralded technique of this time frame, because you get stars in the SERPs if they're done correctly with rich snippets. So you get increased conversions at Google. They show up in the Google Knowledge Panel as reviews from around the web on many searches. And they also provide social proof and content for your website. So to me, it's Google, your own reviews, and some lightweight focus on a vertical so that you at least look good there. So the brand story looks good. You fill out the reviews from the web with 2 or 3 sites so that people looking at you get a consistent story. So it's Google, your own, and 1 or 2 verticals sort of mixed into the mix on occasion.
Great answer.
Hey, Charles, Powerful. Are you getting all this? Charles is our sound engineer. He owns the studio that we do our show from, called Heat Labs in Orlando. But one of the things we did is I ran across I found him from Google My Business, but he's one of those guys that set it and forget it. But once I walked him through it a little bit, he had added photos and all this other good stuff, and he started getting more and more calls. So I was like...
And he has yet to add photos of us, by the way.
Right?
I mean, I just find that as
He's
a major
pulling out
slam.
His phone right now.
Yeah, that may affect your conversion optimization negatively.
Mike, have you seen us?
I'm only guessing.
And guessing well, my friend. Yeah. All right, well, we are just about at the end of the show.
It's time for the tattoo.
It's time for the Search Talk Live tattoo. Mike, we're looking for your most powerful, most succinct piece of advice for our listeners about today's content.
Conversion optimization rules.
Wow.
Okay.
That's a pretty good one.
I like it, and because I think Mike talked about the perspective of optimizing for conversions on your GMB and on Google, which is a segment we haven't heard people really explore that deeply. That was great.
Yeah. So, Mike, I want to thank you for being on the show. If you could tell everybody how they can reach you, where your articles, where you post, and where you're going to be appearance-wise, and that type of stuff.
So, public presentation, September 19th, Denver, part of the Local U crew, which includes Joy is speaking, Joy Hawkins, Cindy Crum, Mary Bowling, David Mim, great speaker lineup. September 19th in Denver. And that's the only public speaking I'm doing. I'm doing a number of private ones. In terms of blogging, blumenthals.com/blog, localu.org. I do a weekly podcast there and a weekly email list there. And then I write about reviews at gatherup.com/blog if you're interested in review-specific content. And then bi-weekly, I do an article at Street Fight Mag with David Mim, sort of a big look at sort of a 10,000-foot view of the industry, of Google, of the issues that agencies and businesses confront.
Mike, I just want to mention before we close that so far in this past hour, I've learned that you have an article at Street Fight magazine, and also you're speaking at Duct Tape Conference. It's painting a different picture than I had of you before the podcast.
Well, I'm not sure. Like you, fortunately, you can't see my real picture, so it may be disappointing in reality.
Well, awesome job, Mike. We really enjoyed having you as a guest, and you were immensely informative.
Yes, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. And people can also reach out to me. My email is mike@gatherup.com.
Are you on Twitter?
Glad to answer. I'm on Twitter, M. Blumenthal on Twitter. So
okay.
Email or Twitter, feel free to reach out to me.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Mike. Guys,
thank you for having me.
You're welcome. All right, guys. Well, thank you for listening to the show. Mark this down on your calendar. I want you guys to be ready. We have Joy Hawkins next week, followed by Keith Good. He's the head of Google, or head of Google. He's the head of search at IBM. And the following week, we have our good friend John Mueller from Google.
Wow.
He is the Webmaster Trends Analyst at Google.
I might come to that one.
I hope you do. So get your questions ready. Again, you can go to Twitter and type in #SearchTalkLive. With your questions, I think a lot of you are going to have good questions. I want to have some questions that, I listened to his videos, and he kind of took over the reins from Matt Cutts back in the day, but I want to ask him some rare questions, something that he doesn't get all the time.
And he kind of threw the gauntlet down when he emailed you. He said, we've got some new stuff coming out, and people typically ask me about the new stuff.
Yeah, I was like, exclusive stuff.
Yeah.
It's going to be cool. But anyway, that's stuff to look forward to. He's going to be on the 1st of the month. And obviously next week we have Joy, who's going to be on the 18th. And then the 18th, I'm sorry, the 17th. And then the 24th, we have Keith Good. And, lots of great content coming your way. So mark it on your calendar, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye-bye.
Search Talk Live is sponsored by the Robert Palmer family of companies. If you have questions for Search Talk Live, or you're interested in being a guest or a sponsor of the show, email Robert at searchtalklive.com. That's searchtalklive.com.